Welcome to Cybersecurity Sense, a weekly podcast providing updates and insight into the latest in cybersecurity. Brought to you by LBMC Information Security. Now, here's your host.
Hey there, everybody. It's William Parks back with LBMC Cybersecurity Sense, another monthly podcast with our two good friends here. We have Andy.kerr, Kyle Hinterberg. Hey guys, how's it going?
Going pretty good.
Good. All right. So I know everyone has loved this series so far. We've had a lot of great feedback from the PCI stuff. Frankly, I need to start throwing up some other stuff too, because it's all PCI right now. So never fear, everybody. We're gonna have other content coming too. But like good old times, and like every month we do, let's just kick it off with the news. What's going on?
Sure. Yeah. One of the biggest things, I know that a few months ago we mentioned kind of from the PCI community meeting that they had mentioned that they were going to get rid of the council mentioned they were going to remove the in place with remediation option. And that now has officially happened. And so they just recently updated their documentation. That is no longer an option, that if you're doing a 4.0 assessment, you can no longer choose in place with remediation. It's back to the same as what it was in version 3.2.1, where it's either in place, not in place, wasn't tested, or wasn't applicable. And that's really your options.
Oh, perfect.
And one other note on that, they still like that idea kind of having a way for QSAs to kind of track, in a sense, problem areas. And so they're going to be releasing a worksheet. We don't know yet what that's going to look like, but it's supposed to be sometime early this year. So hopefully within the next few months, that's something we can update you all on too and say, kind of what that looks like and how it's going to work. But our understanding, again, is it's going to be something shared just between the QSA and the entity being reviewed. So nothing that's going to be public or anyone else is going to be looking at it.
Okay. So it's just kind of like a management kind of piece.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. And then I see something on here about the global content library.
Yeah, that was another piece from the community meeting that we had, learned about, that they were going to be releasing the global content library. And myself and one of our other QSAs here at LBMC, Brian Willis, we actually recorded when we went to Toronto to the community meeting, recorded a session on service provider management and, being told that was going to be part of the global content library. And that also recently came out and now it's open, but we just found out that it looks like it's only going to be available to basically people with a direct relationship with the council. So, like if you're a QSA company or an assessor company, you can view that, or if you're a participating organization. And I think that it's kind of part of their push to get more people to sign up to being participating organizations, that's part now of the benefits that you get as access to this global content library. So it's not just publicly available, which is a little bit upsetting, I think, for me, because I thought it was going to be something they were going to provide to everyone, but I get what they're doing.
Yeah. So basically, for those of us that don't understand PCI or we're still trying to learn, that's me over here. So global content library, I'm guessing, as it sounds, I would have thought that it was a public kind of repository, but you're saying it's not.
No. Yeah, no, it looks like, just like a lot of the other services out there, that you pay for training and so forth. And I think this is the direction that the council's trying to go for, is that, hey, just like, people have put their time and money into creating these trainings, people have put a lot of effort into it. And so I think there is going to be some sort of paywall there to kind of facilitate that. So I'm with Kyle 100%. It's not something I particularly care for, but again, to his point, 100%, I get where they're going with it.
Yeah, it makes sense. And also too, I guess if they're storing all these, you said it's video content, a lot of it is. That takes a lot. If you don't throw it on YouTube, that takes a lot of space. You have to have quite a few machines. Okay, well, cool. Well, so awesome. So today, guys, we have hit a bunch of points in the past on PCI topics. Today, we're going to go over requirement number 1. Is that correct?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yeah, it kind of works out too, diving into requirement 1 in the first month of the year. So
I
hadn't even thought about it when we kind of planned this out.
Hey,
I'll say that we intentionally.
It's perfect.
We made it this way.
We made it this way before we even did it. Oh man! And so this is really going to be covering from version 3.2.1 all the way up to how it's changing in 4.0. So I'll let you two professionals take it away here, and I'll sit back. I'll take my notes as usual, and we'll learn a bit.
So I would say the first thing that that kind of there's a new section in 4.0 that kind of breaks down. It's almost like a summarization of requirement 1, talks about some of the major changes and stuff. So one of the big shocking things that everybody's going to see is the numerical values have changed. The kind of the lineup of what the 3.2.1 looks like in 4.1. So there's kind of been some reorganizing. What used to be 3.2.1 requirement is not going to be necessarily 4.0. So there's been moving and pushing. But for me, what I have found, one of the biggest things is the changing of I'm redefining of what's called a network security control. You're going to see this called NSC. So what in 3.2.1, everyone was, accustomed to seeing firewalls and routers kind of all the way through. Well, obviously, at this point, PCI has brought that up to the new standard age of basically saying network security controls. This is kind of an all-encompassing kind of thing, and it kind of goes beyond the whole physical firewalls. Now, this is going to include things like virtual devices, cloud access controls, virtualization container systems, and any kind of software-defined kind of network technology. So this is going to be a lot bigger scope of devices that are going to be included.
That's a good thing.
It's definitely to me the biggest change, because really if you look at requirement 1 overall, it's still asking you to do almost identically in 4.0 is what it asks you to do in 3.2.1, but just expanding that, because I know Andy and I have ran into issues where people are like, well, I don't have firewalls, I'm all up in AWS, and that's it's not a firewall, it's just AWS network security controls. And so that's where just renaming that a little bit to open it up, so that way when we're talking about firewall rules, it's now just network security rules, ACLs, all of that doing the same thing. And it doesn't matter if it's a physical firewall or just a configuration in AWS. We just want to see how that access is being controlled. And that's really what requirement 1 hits, is just really, kind of to the old terminology, firewall controls. That's basically all of requirement 1, talking through how to segment off and protect your cardholder data environment.
Right. Exactly. I'm actually, just my personal opinion, I'm surprised this didn't happen earlier than now.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, and I'm sure that was in the minds of most people, but you got to figure they wanted to do a complete overhaul with 4.0, and they did it. I mean, it's a complete overhaul. It's very intimidating. So, I mean, they wanted to make sure they kind of brought everything up to, all right, how are modern technologies being utilized in PCI, and what does that look like? It's not just firewalls and routers, it's all these things.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, I would say almost half the assessments I do don't even have, like a physical firewall anymore. Because if you're up in the cloud, that doesn't exist.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, as time changes, things have to be updated and changed. And, I guess the best analogy here is releasing the new iPhone. Sometimes they're a lot different. Sometimes they're not. You have to have the overhaul. That's what happens. So, all right, I don't want to slow down the conversation, though.
No, but yeah, that's really the biggest change. And then if you look through the rest of requirement 1, the only additional new requirement is similar to all the other requirements as we get through them, is more emphasis on roles and responsibilities. That's a big one that they're trying to hit across the board, is making sure people are actually documenting roles and responsibilities for who are doing these things, making sure that there's kind of, the right person where the buck stops at, who is responsible for configuring firewall rules, and, kind of what does that look like. That's the biggest change. Other than that, if you really look through 3.2.1 and 4.0, they really are a mirror of each other, just again using new terminology. Not to jump ahead, but if you look at 3.2.1, it talks about a DMZ, and they don't use that terminology anymore because you don't always have a DMZ. It's now just trusted and untrusted networks, and making sure that you have network security controls between trusted and untrusted networks.
Exactly. And I would say too, to add into that, I want to, is for the practical side of this particular piece, is that, and I'm sure Kyle has run into this just as much as I have, is that you run into it. All right, well, who's responsible for this? Well, I don't know. Who is that? Do you know who that is? No, we need to email them. We don't have them on the call right now. So I think this was going to help cut down on some of that kind of back and forth. Now, obviously, we're not, for PCI, we're not saying, hey, you have to have here, Bob is listed as the, as the manager for this. We're talking about what is that role that is supposed to be responsible for the overall, piece of, the Amazon Web Services, infrastructure, firewall, whatever that may be. What is that role? That's the person we need to go to. That's the person we need to have on this call.
Yeah, and something that in the new 4.0 documents they have in their guidance section, they call out, they recommend people creating RACI charts for policies and procedures, and that's definitely something I would say is going to be the easiest way to tackle that across the board. And if you haven't seen RACI charts, it's easy enough just to Google and see them. It's RACI, just basically documenting who's responsible, who's accountable, who should be consulted, and who should be informed. And just having that out there for any given requirement, any given policy, at the top of a policy right now, a lot of times we see, kind of the table that shows, when it was last updated, changed, etc. Now, if you just add in a RACI table at the top of that policy, that'll be perfect. So that way you're ready for 4.0 when it comes to a lot of those things.
Perfect. Yep. And so those are pretty much the changes, quote unquote, from what we know from 3.2.1 to 4.0, correct?
Yep.
So aside from that, what are just like the general requirements of requirement 1? I mean, so we've already covered roles and responsibilities. I guess we kind of touched on configuration standards a little bit as far as cloud environments go and network stuff. You guys have anything else to add to that?
I would say that as we're kind of, the standards, when we're talking about standards, it is, a lot of times we'll say, hey, what is your standard for kind of building out this device? That's usually typically like something CIS benchmarks or whatever it is, hey, you have your own specific, document that you've based off a NIST or, whatever that may be. Those are typically the things that we're looking for. I haven't run into too many issues where people didn't understand what that was. And even kind of starting to bleed into the next thing is that even change control tickets, and Kyle, you can kind of speak to this too. I typically, on most assessments, when people are providing standards and tickets to say, hey, this is a change that we made to this particular device on this day, here's how you can kind of follow it, and you can see that we did it based off of our standard, our policy. I haven't run into too many issues. Have you?
No, I would say, in my opinion, this is something that really, like, within the last 5-ish years, I feel like organizations are getting a lot better at, especially in networking. Because I feel like if you go historically back, like developers did change control tickets and networkers are like, oh, you need a new firewall rule, I'll just pop it in. But right. I feel like now that's no longer the case.
Put it in there for you.
Yeah, that's just it. They finally have caught up a little bit, and now they are following change control. And it's like, oh yeah, before we can put this in, we got to talk to CAB, we got to do all these things, and then we can finally put in the ticket, get it approved, and add this firewall rule. It's not. I feel like, again, 5-10 years ago, the networking was a little bit more Wild West with your network engineers kind of doing what they were doing, and now it's becoming more organized. And I think that's part two of the whole cloud movement and moving to more of like a DevOps kind of standard where all of that's getting incorporated together. Yeah,
100%.
Perfect.
And even I would say the like, as we're kind of moving through these, me personally, I think the sections that I feel like we still struggle with, and we've already kind of talked about this a little bit with the executive summary, is the data flow and network diagrams, and I won't dive too much down into that rabbit hole since we kind of already covered that to a degree. But that and these kind of documented insecure services and the kind of the review process for devices. So, for instance, case in point, now we at LBMC, what we typically do is when we're going through scoping. So this is the time that we sit down with our client and their firewalls and go, hey, all right, let's pull up the firewall. Now, sometimes we do this during our remote or on-site visits. Hey, let's pull up the firewalls. Let's walk through them line by line. You've got your network and your data flow diagrams up. You've got your, just your interface, and you're just kind of going through, or your configs in some cases. And you're having the client walk through line by line, what is this? What is this? This is the time where you start seeing those insecure ports to services. Hey, see that insecure ports to services? Is that documented somewhere? Why do you guys have that open? And at the same time, then you start pulling in your review process. Hey, we've gone through all this, but I'm seeing this rule here that hasn't been hit in 6 months. Or this looks like it's a duplicate. Pull up your review process. Did this get documented? I feel like these three pieces are sometimes can be challenging. Not all the time. Mm-hmm. Some people have got their stuff together. But what I find is these three pieces can be challenging, talking about the review process, finding those insecure ports, making sure they're documented, what the reason is behind them, and then have that corresponding with their data flow and network diagrams.
I would agree 1,000%. That really, kind of that service list is always so difficult, that people, and even when they're doing the reviews, too often what I see people doing when they're doing that requirement, to do a 6-month review on the network security controls, they tend to do a lot of times of looking at everything that's changed in that 6 months and not necessarily looking at everything that exists. And that's where they have to really be going through everything that exists, looking at all of those old rules, identifying them, tying them back, figuring out, are they really needed? Because that's what we get when we're going through scoping. It's like, oh, what's that rule? It's like, oh, yeah, that was for, a logging service. We disabled that 6 months ago. And it's like, well, then why didn't you disable the rule? And that's the types of things they really should be catching, and not just worrying about changes, but, really looking through all of it. And on the insecure side, something I run into a lot is like, oh, we have port 80. That's just web. We don't care about that. We just know that's good. But it's like, okay, is it serving up something that needs to be secured? If so, port 80 isn't good. If you're just doing, some type of a web page that doesn't matter, that's fine, but document it.
Yeah, and I would say this for the remediation to help clients with again, this is a section that I see not all the time, but fairly frequently. What I saw one client do is they had a junior network infrastructure analyst, and basically what he did was that was his thing. It was part of his duties, is that because it was a set of fresh eyes, it was always the new guy that kind of rolled in, and he would go through with a set of fresh eyes. And again, this was on a smaller scale, and he would be able to, hey, what's this? I don't know what this is. He'd mark it down, and then he would be able to go ask the senior guys, hey, I was doing our review, and I just had a couple of quick questions. Now, on a larger scale, I've seen clients, put, some really fancy tools out there that'll do these reviews for them, and that'll kind of, hey, it'll do, this looks like a duplicate. This looks like this hasn't been used in a while. There's obviously some input from the tool itself to try to guide you and direct you as far as doing your review, but it's not always accurate either. So that you get a lot of false positives, or you get in a situation to where it doesn't see something as vulnerable. This is where you actually need, kind of that manual process to kind of address this, and then have somebody sign off on it. Yes, we did a review process. Yes, these are the things we're removing, and then instigate that, kind of wrote that into your change control process.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I would say too that, even on that tool side, when you go into a large organization, sometimes you do need some type of a tool or a very good process to help you. I think it's getting similar to log review, where in 321, it's technically okay to do manual log review, even though we all know that's basically impossible for any environment of any size to actually review logs manually. And now in 4.0, that's where they're calling out that you actually need to have like a SIM or some type of a tool that's assisting you in log review. When you get into a large environment with hundreds of firewalls, odds are you're going to have to get, like a Firemon or an AlgoSec or something like that to help you do that. Otherwise, it's just impossible to keep your hands around all of those rules. And if you say you are, it's like, okay, then explain to me how you can actually do that.
I was about to ask if a SIM would be super applicable in this situation, but you already answered my question. I mean, once you started bringing up log review, I was like, okay, I know where we're going with this now. I know where we're going to go with this. Okay, cool.
And I would say even, I think the next section as far as and again, this 3.2.1 and 4.0 both have this. They're a little bit of renumbering, but, as far as the protection and, the consistent use of the firewall configurations. And Kyle, you can, if you've had something different, I haven't run into too many situations to where that wasn't an easy thing to find out. Yep. No, everybody seems like they're protecting their stuff. I haven't seen too many. Have you?
No. I feel like there's several requirements or sub requirements in requirement 1 that are almost automatic if someone's running at all a decent shop. The same thing for like the requirements to do like NAT or PAT to protect your inside IP addresses. It's like you're not going to even communicate with the internet if you're not doing those things. So, I get that they're requirements, but at the same time, I myself have like never ran into an issue with some of those. It's more or less automatic.
Yeah. I have seen a couple of things, and again, again, this is going to kind of go back to this whole working session that I typically have with our QSAs at LBMC do anyway. I didn't do this at my previous firm, but the LBMC, really pushes us to be able to walk through these. Is those inbound, outbound connections? As we're kind of again. walking through with the client, looking at the reviews, look at the diagrams, you look at the insecure ports, and we start getting to these inbound, outbound rules and stuff. What does this do? What does this do? And then we're always looking for that explicit deny at the end, looking for, yes, everything else, this is all good traffic, and then they deny everything else. So again, haven't run into too many problems, seeing that. But I think for 4.0, and I push this out to all the QSAs out there, is that with 4.0, this is going to be, all evidence is going to be very much definitive. It needs to be explicit for your evidence. And what I mean by that is there's that chart that they have now in 4.0 in the executive summary where it's not just documentation, policies, procedures. This is here's our firewall review, but it is the evidence that you saw while you were going through that firewall. Here's the inbound, outbound, deny all. Here's those insecure ports, and there's nothing here that you're taking those screenshots, because you're going to have to list that stuff in the actual ROC itself now. And so it needs to be very explicit, showing exactly what's there, and there's going to be a lot less descriptiveness of what you saw. Instead of saying, hey, LBMC observed or LBMC reviewed or whatever, it is boom, here's the evidence, this meets the requirement, and so forth.
So there's no more gray area there. There's no buffer room at all. That's how it should have been. I feel like I feel like with networking and traffic and whatnot, it's very black and white. There's not a whole lot of gray.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing I run into sometimes on the whole inbound, outbound is a lot of times people pay attention to the inbound and worry about them, which it makes sense because those, generally inbound rules are the, quote unquote more important. But then you'll find people that are like, yeah, our outbound rules is, star. And it's like, well, that's not necessarily a good idea. You should know from your cardholder data environment exactly where it needs to talk to, even if it's a range of IPs or whatever it is, you should still be able to lock that down, and more than just, literally in any. So that's the one place that sometimes I run into a few struggles, is just trying to help people lock down those outbound rules, because technically they do need to be reduced to the, really the minimum required.
I was working on an assessment right before the holidays, right before everybody started taking off and enjoying their time off. We were doing a pen test on an organization, and all their inbound rules were perfectly locked down, and we weren't able to get in, but from the inside, they started noticing traffic calling out. And so if those outbound rules had been in place, they probably could have caught something a bit faster, but they think it was a C2 potentially that was calling out to a command and control server, right? And that's one reason why it's so important to have that, because if you don't have that, that's free flow.
Yeah, that was even getting back to Log4j. The easiest way to shut that down is controlling your outbound rules.
Yep. It stops a lot.
And this
of
all
traffic.
goes. Oh yeah, and this all builds to the ultimately saying, hey, there definitely needs to be, and even Kyle hit on it just a few minutes ago. There needs to be this definitive look into what are your trusted and untrusted zones. What do those look like? And again, this is all part of the working session, is sitting down with that client. Where's your trusted stuff? Where's your untrusted? What does that look like? And this even pulls in wireless. As far as wireless, what is your review process for your wireless? Is it a part of your CDE? Is it a part of your overall payment channels? And now, typically speaking, I haven't run into too many issues with wireless. However, what I have done is I've run into a client where they're saying, hey, we're using wireless for this particular payment channel, and you start digging a little bit. Well, then they come to find out, they have this obscure, warehouse or something. They come to find out, if somebody actually can go to the warehouse, this doesn't typically happen, but they can go make a payment there. Oh my goodness. Well, then that wireless network that is not supposed to be a part of your overall CDE now gets roped in. It's not segmented. Everything's in the same spot, and it just blows up. So I have seen this. This has happened on at least 2 clients I've done over my career in PCI, where there was this obscure place that nobody thought any payments were happening. And then you start digging a little bit using this whole overall working session. You get somebody on the line that manages the wireless. Oh yeah, we take payments over there.
Mm-hmm. I've had that same thing happen, because a lot of times I feel like, kind of management thinks that we can't have wireless in scope. It's impossible. And you can have wireless in scope. You just got to, make sure it's secure. But I've had, a CISO who told me, never have wireless. We completely blacklist that. We cannot have wireless because we don't want to deal with that. And so then I went for an on-site, and during the first store review, I'm like, do you guys have wireless? Oh yeah, we have these tablets, so that way people can take orders. And the CISO was there, and he's like, I literally had no idea. And so that's where you run into, you have to, be not necessarily be the department of no when it comes to security, but a little bit more of working through things, because people are still going to do it anyways. And this is an example where wireless can work. You just have to work, and do it right.
For QSAs, I would say this: for those men and women that go on site, or they're doing these kind of on site remote interviews, whatever it is. Yes, the managers are great. They're always great to have in the room, but get somebody that's there every day, hands on, that's doing the job. And so, not to say that the managers don't, or can't speak to these things, but the issue is this is not their day-to-day responsibilities. They're managing teams. These guys are managing groups of folks all day, every day. You need that analyst, that engineer that is doing this every day. Hey, do you take payments over wireless? What is your trusted and untrusted networks? What are these firewall rules saying? These are the folks you need on the line to talk to. So my recommendation is, if you get on a line and you're like, hey, you're going through the introductions. Hey, my name is such and such. I do this. Okay, that's okay. Do we have somebody that does this? I mean, again, tactfully asking for somebody. Do we have an analyst on the phone? Do we have somebody that's doing these, doing this job day in and day out, managing the wireless, these network security controls? I'm trying to get in the habit of saying that, and get them on the line.
Right, and so those also exist between the trusted and untrusted networks that we were kind of talking about.
Yep.
Is that correct? Yeah. So go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I was going to say that definitely ties into that, and making sure again that we know what's trusted, what's part of your cardholder data environment, what's connected to it, and what's untrusted, like the internet or a cell phone network or any of that, and making sure that those network security controls exist there. And kind of on that side too, when you have devices, like the most common one is going to be a laptop, where someone goes into the office, connects it up to their office, plugs it in, is on the network, protected by company firewalls. It's secure. But then that same individual unplugs that laptop, takes it home, or takes it to Starbucks. That device has to be protected all the time. And so that's where you need to make sure you have things like anti-malware. And the biggest one is going to be some type of a firewall. A lot of times, it might be the Windows firewall, or maybe your end user solution has some type of firewalling capabilities in it, but something to really, in a sense, segment that system from wherever it's living, because otherwise you're pulling, the Starbucks network into scope, and you don't want to be doing that.
Now, I on that note, and that's a great example, and on that same note, what I've run to on several situations is that you have a customer service representative who takes cardholder data on their laptop. They're in scope. They're part of a segmented network. No problem whatsoever. They will take that laptop and like, hey, I have a conference call in this other room that's part of the untrusted network. I'm going to go take my laptop over here, and I'm going to plug in. Well, what is this untrusted network a part of? Well, it's just flat across the board. Mm-hmm. And so now you have taken that CDE system, which is what it is, and you have now plugged it into an insecure network. And so I tell you, Kyle, I don't know if you've run into this, but I've run into this a couple of times. I'm like, okay, to the client, so you take your, how many transactions are we talking about here? Are we taking, multiple transactions are going through this system? Sometimes they're accessing cardholder data in bulk, and whatever that may be. And then, okay, that's the same as taking a CDE system out of your protected card network and plugging it in over here someplace. And I'm like, well, but what are we talking about? Again, this is, we're talking about, is this plugged in for hours, days? Are we talking about, half an hour, 45 minutes? And so this is where the kind of conversation, and this is all, in requirement one, and Kyle brought up some great points there, is that what is the risk? How many laptops are we talking about? Are we talking about the entire customer service representative folks that are now moving their stuff over into, this insecure network? Or are we talking about the manager?
Right.
And if so, how many transactions, are going now? PCI says if it's one transaction, if it's cardholder data flowing through, then at that point, it is a CDE system. But then at the same time, there's always that caveat that talks about, well, what about individual cashiers that are taking one credit card at a time? So this is a situation that you have to make sure you're taking in all the variables, that you understand the entire situation, and then you need to be able to discuss that with your client to figure out, how much of a risk are we talking about here? Or is this person really taking cardholder data, or is this just a manager that is normally part of the customer service representative folks, and then they're just plugging it in, temporarily, but they actually never take any cardholder data.
Right.
Yep.
That's all. I mean, great points. I mean, seriously, even from just the standpoint, I mean, I actually think about that every time I go to a public space and I hook up to a Wi-Fi. I'm like, oh man, I don't know what's about to happen. We're joining the Wild West now. So I have a question for you guys. So let's say theoretically, if my company has work from home employees, let's say I'm one of your clients, right? If my company has work from home employees and they're able to access or enter PCI account data, are there houses or home offices in scope too? Since we're talking about taking devices to separate networks, does that also apply to your own network in your house?
That's a great question.
Yeah, and that's something definitely with the pandemic and everything. Everyone is working from home, and that's a place where PCI has said, the council, that their houses are not in scope. We're never going to have to do an assessment where we have to go pick a sample of people and knock on their doors and go explore their houses. But at the same time, that workstation and the network it is potentially still in scope depending on what it's doing, and that kind of gets back to in requirement 1 having some type of a firewall. What I love to see, and it's not done too often, but where companies actually provide their employees with some type of a physical firewall, and they plug their device into that, hook that to their home network, and then they are protected with a VPN right to the company. Right. That's awesome. But at the same time, again, something like a Windows firewall with anti-malware and decent end user and endpoint protection controls can segment that system off to the point that it can still be used without necessarily bringing in that entire network into scope.
Wow, that's perfect answer.
And I've seen another way to do this. And so one particular company, same kind of thing. All their customer service folks were at home, and they actually implemented a P2PE device in their home, and so it was plugged into their laptop. And so when the payment came up, and they're doing their payment, everything is plugged into that specific P2PE device. They're taking the laptop out, so every time they were entering that credit card, great, now you've got something implemented here, and you can take that out of scope.
Right.
Yeah. And one thing I would say just in general is if you do have people working from home that are accepting or working with payments, it's absolutely, in my opinion, a necessity to have some type of, acceptable use policy, clean desk policy, something to make sure people aren't just having credit card information laying around. If they have a reason to print it for any reason, make sure they're locking it up, that they are, protecting it appropriately. Because again, that physical space isn't necessarily in scope that we're going to come do a review, but that doesn't mean a breach couldn't happen in that space. If you have a laptop sitting there and, the UPS guy comes, not to pick on UPS or any delivery guy, and sees credit card information or takes a bundle of papers from your desk that has credit card information, that's still a breach. And so making sure those types of things don't happen is obviously important.
Right. Perfect. That's great advice. Thank you both. Oh my gosh. We're learning new things every day. Requirement 1 doesn't sound too different, but it's always good to have the good reminder. And honestly, thank you for touching on the new stuff, because I know that, like as we're going through this topic, or how should I name it? This like a TV show, like several episodes. Well, what am I thinking? I can't think of the word. Anyway, as we're going through all the PCI requirements, just try and take away something new every time, guys. If you're not paying attention, if you learn one thing, even if it's a small little detail, that's of the benefit to you, and that makes us happy because we provided something to you that you can actually go forth and leverage and use, right? So anyway, thank you for listening to the LBMC Cybersecurity Sense podcast. This is January's episode, so I guess we have 11 more for this year coming up.
And as always, as we always try to say, if there are merchants out there that have questions, concerns, thoughts about, hey, we need help with PCI, or we feel like we need to try to get a handle on 4.0 before it comes out, please feel free to reach out to Kyle and I here at LBMC. Mine's andy.kerr at lbmc.com. And Kyle's is, again, Kyle Hinterberg at lbmc.com. Please feel free to email us, ask us questions, reach out to us, and we will do our best to kind of assist you through that.
Perfect. Any parting words, Kyle?
Nope. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. All right, guys. You guys take care and have a good one. We'll see you on the next episode.
All right. Thanks, guys.